Anybody at all? Feel free. Yes.
Do you see it as a sad film?
A sad film. It's a good question. I see it as a film that is actually full of hope. It's an expression, I suppose, of a camaraderie for people past and present that have come to Hackney, made Hackney their home, continue to live in Hackney.
Use the microphone, please.
Sorry, is that better?
Yes.
I was hold it very close. You'll think I was a radio producer in my past life. Well, I don't think it's a sad film. I think it certainly expresses a kind of regret in terms of, for example, the fine sort of progressive tradition of social housing that we could see in Hackney, we could see through the archive. I think it expresses a kind of regret that that's been let go. But as I said, I think was trying to express a kind of this expression of feeling about place and where people work or call home. It's an expression of camaraderie with people who went through certain privations, coming out of the Depression and World War II. So I don't see it as sad. I think I see it as essentially hopeful for people, and people endure. I think governments come and go, policies come and go, but essentially people endure. I think I was trying to say that council housing or social housing gave people duration in their lives, whereas what we've seen in the recent past in Hackney has been a kind of a sort of moment where developers have got in the moment to make money, put up blocks that you saw on the film, build flats, one bed flats where local people couldn't afford, and I think that's yeah. I think that yeah. Got to say some more about
No, I'll just say that there is an element that's kind of elegiac a little bit, because that social housing enabled families to live in Hackney, and when they bunged up those flats at Dalston where we were living, it basically said that there isn't a place for families. You can't make money out of families. There was an almost direct replacement. I mean, not quite, because some of those places that you saw, they were still there, aren't they, on Amherst and along there. But even so, it was a straight decision made at that moment that they wouldn't cater for families in the way that post-war, well, even pre-war, the 1930s, 40s, did actually do that. So there's that theme there, isn't there? Yeah.
Did you see it as sad? Was that your thinking?
There were definitely elements of it that I thought were like quite emotionally raw to watch, but I think the hopefulness came through, but you couldn't escape the fact that it was sitting on quite a deep well of personal pain.
Yes.
So obviously 2011 is a little while ago now. If you're making a film now, would the things you would change? How would it feel different?
Question was there, that was 2011, it was a long time ago, young lady says at the front. If we were making that film today, would it be different? That's a difficult one, because actually we're not living here anymore. So it wouldn't be necessarily, I wouldn't feel in a position to write about Hackney. Whereas at that moment, just then, I'd lived in Hackney about 33 years, and my grandparents had lived in Hackney, and I wasn't actually born here, but I used to come to Hackney quite often as a child, so that's the opening was about that. That's what I put into it. And you had lived in Hackney for 20 years?
Nearly 20.
Nearly 20 years, wasn't it? So it's a bit difficult to answer that one. Wouldn't be able to make a film about that. Yeah.
I think the themes would be very similar, because I was also thinking at the time about how people are enabled to live well in the city, whether we can live well or not in the city. So although we've moved on, I think there are similar themes, and certainly in terms of housing, and the problem has only become more acute, I would have thought, since 2011. And for people of younger generation, it's very, very hard to live, to find suitable accommodation. So, and also, of course, now the twin theme is migration to the cities, and I think that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed. It's the environment in which we live, and the kind of hostile environment that persists. Even this week, we see with the government white paper talking about this island of strangers. Well, I think themes would be very similar, in fact, because I think what we're trying to show, or certainly to show how migration to an inner city place like Hackney brings diversity and cultural enrichment, and can revivify places and streets and buildings, and that's I don't think that's changed. And you just look along here in Clapton now. I mean, it's completely changed from 2011, I would say. So.
I have a question.
Hello.
How does it feel knowing that you made this in 2011, like this piece of art that you made back then, for the reasons you made it then, for it now to be shown 14 years later, and all of us came to see it, wanting to see it now? How does that make you feel?
Well, it's very nice, isn't it? You can sort of virtually sell out the cinema. It's lovely. We had about 50 or 60 screenings at a time, 2011, 2012, 2013, and then we've had the odd occasional screening in the more recent years, and I showed it just recently, last year, at Hackney Picture House as part of the Hackney at Home exhibition that the photographer Tom Hunter curated. So it sort of continues to find some kind of place or resonance within Hackney. I don't know whether outside of Hackney whether that will be the case, but it's nice to show it in Hackney.
I quite like the idea that there's some history in the film that was then contemporary. I mean, looking around the room, I could see some young people there that, I mean, you might wonder like what was there at certain places, and you can see them being built that have now been there for the last 10 years or so. So it's the film's already kind of its own history, isn't it? It's quite intrigued by that. Sort of live long enough to see a film sort of become history. Yeah. I get the same feeling if ever I look at. Has anyone ever seen the film Hue and Cry? It's a fiction film, but it was a film that was shot in the bomb sites of straight after the war. So it's like a kind of kids thriller. It was, if I can get it right, it was Michael Balcon, I think, produced it, possibly directed it. Daniel Day-Lewis's father-in-law. Sorry, just a little bit of film crap there. Anyway, it's just that at the time it was incredibly contemporary when it was shot, but now it's like an incredible historical document because hardly anybody else shot as much stuff around the bomb sites of London. I sort of just got a feeling a bit like that just watching this. The bomb site, well, not quite a bomb site, but yes, that same idea. But then that's also in the, I think at some point we say the layers of history, that things keep unfolding, so there are always layers upon layers, aren't there? It's hard to capture that in a film. It's hard to grab that, but I think Emma did it so well with these layers of documentary. I mean, there's stuff there that was in the Hackney archives that you retrieved. It was in tatty little boxes of, well, what was it shot on? Not Super 8, it was
Super 16.
Super 16, old, just in boxes, roughly labelled, and Emma got them digitised. Stuff there, well, I mean, it's hardly ever seen the light of day since it was shot, I think. I mean, there's a few shots there of the very, very old stuff, the slums that you saw there, I don't think I've seen shot footage like that anywhere else. Where you see the old loos and the little backs of the buildings, I don't think I've seen that. I don't think I've seen that anywhere else. I've seen it in northern England, you know, when they go, oh well, old working class dwellings, they only exist in the north of England, you know what I mean? But to see that in a London setting, I don't think I've ever seen that. And then again, all those children playing round the flats, they so often gets ignored. And you found all that, didn't you? Yeah.
How much more footage was there on the archive that you didn't use? I mean, what percentage of what you looked through did you actually use?
It's going back a bit now. Probably I probably viewed about 14 hours, I think. It's quite not a massive amount, but yeah.
So for anyone else making a film, there's a lot of good footage there.
Yes. I use the best of it.
We can reuse it.
You should, go and check out Hackney Archive, see what they got. But yeah.
Yes, right up the back. Yeah.
Just you talking about, I was around at the same time as well when they were building before the Olympic Park, and it feels like it's been there a while now. You talk about what will happen, how will it be, how do you feel about that area now?
I've been down there a couple of times for events of one sort or another. Yeah, I think actually it's become quite a nice playground. And obviously, you know, at one point it wasn't sure even what would happen to the stadium, and the fact that West Ham took it over, I mean, saved it really. I mean, so that the fact that it's still used in that respect. And I did, you know, I mean, the couple of times I've been over there, I found it quite hard to read about how to get into it and how to get out of it. But I guess people have become familiar with that. But so it didn't seem very accessible because somebody said, "Oh, will you go down that side street and you go over that footbridge?" And I said, "Well, where's the sign?" And there was no signage. But maybe that's improved. I don't know. So it's quite often these places, I notice that when they happen, that people, they don't make them very kind of user friendly to start off with. It has to be kind of worn in. So maybe it's better now. But those were my thoughts. Wow, that was about 6 years ago, I think. I went there. I'm not sure I've been there since. Yeah. There seemed to be like a sort of, I noticed in terms of the kind of theme of this film, that people were adapting the area around by the canal. There were people with graffiti and people living there in canal boats and sort of building things that probably weren't fully legal and probably rather good fun. I could see there was a sort of a move that people were creating their own environment down there, which seemed quite nice. Yeah. Do you like it yourself?
I think it's it's well used and it seems well looked after.
Good.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, well, on another point, it's just nice to see Star Bakery again, which has sort of been replaced by something that looks quite similar somehow, but obviously isn't at all similar. But I'd kind of forgotten about it, so it's really nice to see it again.
We would have bought it if we could, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we did make inquiries. That's
To the
right.
council, but they wouldn't sell it as the story in the film. People that are already in places, making their way with small businesses and projects, invited to try and buy properties, well, then we're not able to do that.
Yeah, and the poignant thing about Star Bakery was that it was not owned by, but run by an artisan genuine Viennese baker, Rab's, the bakery I think still in Essex Road.
Yeah.
And he made something I've never seen anywhere else in London. He made a Vienna ring, which was like a Danish pastry in a ring. Absolutely beautiful. You could only buy it there virtually in the whole of London, I think. And he actually had the old ovens in the basement, I think, from before the war that his father had, I think. And they tried again and again to try and get it, but all the plans that Hackney had for that bit of Dalston Lane, they couldn't get it, so they've kind of retreated back into Rab's in Essex Road. Yeah. And it was the same with Abdul. I don't know what's happened to Abdul at the Ganges. I mean, he was desperate to buy that place. Does anyone know? Because I used to be friends with him, but no, I don't know whether, because I don't think they're there, are they?
No.
So I don't know where the Gange, as I used to call it, where the Gange has gone. Best Dahl I've had in London, that is. Yeah.
I think it's an Abbey Betts now.
Yes, that's right. But I noticed, sorry, the sounds guy's still there,
That's right.
which is this whole story in itself, how they managed to cling on. High Tech, are they called?
I think.
Yeah, that's right. Because he was an old rocker, the bloke who ran that. Yeah, very interesting story. Yes, sorry.
I wanted to ask about the sound archives, which were very impressive.
Sound.
Just where did you find them? Some of the songs, some of the older recordings.
Actually, there wasn't really any sound archive. All the sound was either I'd recorded or
Right.
the actors, the voices that you heard in the film
Okay.
sang the songs. So that was all in Michael's script, and other sound recordings. I made those.
So they were all in the play for voices. So yeah, I should just say. So I wrote what's a kind of documentary drama radio play that a group of school students could put on. That was the sort of first wave of it, and then we got some professional actors to do it. So it had a life of 2 or 3 shows, but they were all sort of my memories. Yeah. So the songs are songs that I knew or collected. Sometimes from Hackney kids, and so it was a mixture of reflections, and then say the Caribbean guy, and the thing on the building site, that was Headley from over the road when I used to live in Meeson Street, or the lady who was complaining about the noise upstairs, that was the lady also in Meeson Street. It was 96, and all the knockers going down Pedro Street, rap, 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 rap. She used to tell me that almost every day I met her. I'd come out and then she'd say, him upstairs. Here we go. And then, and tap, tap, tap's driving me mad. He's driving me mad, he is. And then I'd wait for the rap, rap, rap bit, sure it would come out. And then I was on the buses, you know. And it was wonderful. I mean, it was like a poem. And so that's what I did. It was my sort of collected memories of what people said. I mean, the inspiration was under Milkwood. So that was the inspiration when somebody came to me and said, could you do a thing called Hackney Streets? And I thought, oh, under Milkwood, could I do it, sort of thing. And then I thought it had its life, and then Emma looks at it and goes, you could make a film out of that. And I went, really? And that's how the film came down. Yeah, but it was sort of archive in my head. And the other thing I was influenced by is Ewan McColl's radio ballads. So it's a combination of Under Milkwood and McColl's radio ballads like Singing Fishing and the ballads of John Axon. I don't know if you know those. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you thought it was archive. Yes, it was more like pastiche, but anyway, don't tell anyone. Yeah. Artifice, that's it.
Pure artifice.
Yeah. Pastiche is a bit pejorative, isn't it? Yeah, artifice. Yes, right up the back, yeah.
I thought the paintings added a lot to the film. I just wondered if you could talk a bit about how you
Paintings.
chose them, if there's any personal relations with them.
I suppose I chose the paintings because I was trying to aspire to a painterly aesthetic in the film, and I was looking at these painters because of the way that they found a beauty in the urban landscape, and that's what I was trying to do with the film. Also, I thought they gave moments of literal stillness in the film, and I wanted to create a kind of slow, still aesthetic, because I think if you have time to look at something, then you have time to think about it, and then if you have time to think about it, then you might have time to feel it, to feel something about it, and look at and about these spaces that you're invited to look at, and to think about the, I suppose, hidden repositories of hidden stories and layers of life that are contained within the landscape, or certainly within the buildings that you're being asked to look at. And also, I think I wanted to try and appropriate or reappropriate the city as a place of beauty, because I find real beauty in the urban landscape, and I think media narratives will often portray the city, a place like Hackney, as a sort of a site of ugliness and misdeed, and somehow that kind of blames the people who live in the place or the buildings for that, and I thought it often sort of belies the communities that live in a place like Hackney. So it was just a way of trying to reappropriate something from something.
We could credit them, couldn't we? So you had
Leon Kossoff.
Leon
yeah,
Kossoff.
was one the painting. Sadly died now. Jock McFadyen and James MacKinnon were the three artists. And I approached each artist to ask their commission, and didn't meet Leon Kossoff, but did correspond with him, and he gave me his commission. And then
you had to shoot that at the DFE, didn't you? Or the Ministry of Culture.
Yeah, because it belongs to the government.
Yeah.
That was quite funny. As I resisted at first, but then I quoted the fact that this did belong to the nation, so they couldn't reasonably refuse that. So we did it.
And then you went to Jock McFadyen's workshop.
Warehouse studio, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So Jock's painting's very large, and then filmed James's paintings, which are slightly small, which are like beautifully, very luminous at the end. I think there's a real luminosity to them. Yeah. So.
Yes.
You've kind of alluded to this before, but I'm curious if you could talk a bit about what inspired you originally to start shooting back in 2009 and forward.
The question was what inspired Emma in 2009. Yeah, to shoot it.
Probably a number of things. I think one of the things was actually attending live performances of Michael's Play for Voices, Hackney Streets, and I was very moved by that. And so that was one reason that I wanted to try and engage further with it. And I think the other thing was, I suppose, trying to, as I say, I think. As I was trying to say, is trying to say and reappropriate something about the city and about the inner city, and to find beauty in the urban spaces and derelict buildings. And I think also it came out of being influenced by certain films that I've seen over the years, films like London by Patrick Keeler. Agnes Varda's films, particularly The Gleaners and I, very essayistic film. Terence Davies films, particularly Distant Voices, Still Lives, and A Liverpool Childhood, which used a lot of archive and song, and so it was coming out of that really, and also my work in radio, working in the arts unit, in radio, making sort of arts documentaries, based poetry, mostly poetry based. So, yeah. And living in Hackney, so for, loving the place and wanting to do it justice.
Yes, we'll come back to you again. But yes, yeah.
What was your method for kind of filming things? Did you just wander about with the cameras and your attention, or were you a bit more strategic?
No, I'm a bit more strategic there. I'm a planner. you can't wander. Well, I didn't feel I could wander about too much because it costs money to make a film, and we filmed on Super 16 film. We filmed on film, so that's a decision in itself, and that brings financial, ramifications because you have to develop that. So that means that you've got to choose your shots quite carefully. So no, I had a shot list. I knew, obviously, I lived in Hackney for a long while, and I had sort of develop an idea of shots that I thought would be able to say something. And I also wanted those shots they needed to work very hard, because obviously it's a montage technique. So what you're seeing on screen is not necessarily not what you're hearing necessarily. So all those shots had to work very hard to create a kind of a flow and a thread to pull you through the film. So they're all considered, you know. But it was what I did was went out with cinematographer Connor on about 3 or 4 occasions over a 15-month period, and then we shot in different places. I also wanted to try and reflect perhaps night to day or the day to night seasons if I could. I don't know if that worked, but that was a kind of in the back of my mind. And I also sort of set myself the discipline of not filming with any movement in the camera. All the movement was in the frame, had to be within the frame. I mean, there's certain camera moves within, but very few. So that was another thing I was thinking about, where to shoot statically. Everything was shot mute, so we didn't have any sound to record. I recorded the sound afterwards, worked on editing the soundtrack after we shot, when I'd assembled the images. So that's how we did it.
Remember, there was a great moment where I had a spell at film school, and they always said, either make your soundtrack and cut the film to the soundtrack, or the other way around. You shoot and then cut the sound to the film. Emma didn't do either. Yeah, that's right. You flip between the two, and I was going, how is she doing it? No, don't say anything. Don't say anything. How is she? She's not cutting one to the other. She's doing both at the same time. Anyway, that was.
I was thinking in segments, of
Yeah.
trying to put segments together bit by bit,
So,
and then find that thread through. So yeah, it was.
so when all of you who make films, you know, remember, break the rules.
Following on from the previous question, had you already been to the archive and had your sort of pre-selection before you went into the streets, or was it the other way around?
I think I probably started filming before I'd gone to the archive, and then as I was working on the film, went to the archive and then
And so you were
saw what
hoping
was
to
there, so I
find,
could then review it and select it as I went. Yeah.
so you were looking for locations that you had already filmed?
Not necessarily, but if they were there, that was a happy.
No, because it was just Ridley
Yeah.
Road was
Yeah.
such.
Yeah.
You also got
Yeah.
the double effect of, I think it's Hertford. Is it Hertford?
Well, yes, Hartford Road.
Hertford Road,
Yeah.
where
Yes.
Mosley is assembling,
Yeah.
and then you
Yeah.
shot that.
It was back and forth, I think. So a
Okay,
bit
so
of
rather like the
so-
sound and the image.
Yeah, 3 or 4 periods of filming, and then in between I was doing the research for the archive, and thinking about the sound, and so it was just piecing it together bit
So
by
it's
bit.
very much cumulative over time.
Yeah, exactly. How I'd make a radio program, in fact. It was
How did
kind
you
of-
know the archive was there? I forgot.
I don't know, because it was a Hackney archive, so.
Yeah, but how did you get to? How did you?
Moving footage if they had film archive.
What made you look? I wouldn't even know to
I
look.
don't know. It's my job.
I mean, do you think the other London boroughs have got things like that? If you went to Haringey and go, can we see your film archive, Haringey?
Well, I would. It was again coming from radio. I would often use all sorts of different media or archive, and that archive could be from film archive. We just use audio only, so there's always potential in.
I mean, you know, there's a huge archive, sort of semi-secret archive of photographs. It's with the. Someone will tell me what it's called.
London Metropolitan Archive.
That's the one. And it's got incredible, because I just looked at one street I forgot what it was for now. I think for a thing I was doing with some young people, and if you just go through it, and then there suddenly up pops these pictures of houses from, I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. They go, no, we haven't got anything on that street. We have in the next street. There's vast amounts of photographic archive just sitting in the London Metropolitan Archive. Thank you. Yeah. So again, if anybody's looking for stuff to do, direct locality stuff, I was amazed by it. I know, Shacklewell Lane, that's what I was looking at, I think for the kids at Shacklewell School. That's right, we wanted to find stuff of that locality, and I was interested to see whether my Bubba's bag wash was still there. Bubba, his grandmother. My Bubba's bag wash where we used to go was there. It wasn't, but anyway, I went looking for it. Sorry, you had a follow-up, yes.
Yeah, I had two kind of mini questions. Michael, you talked about your family connections with Hackney, and Emma, I was wondering about your connection with Hackney. And the other mini question is about this, you already mentioned something about the juxtaposition of sound and image, that they're not, the same. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little about that.
What the
So-
connection with Hackney?
Yeah.
I lived in Hackney for 22 years, so the majority of my adult life. I'm a Londoner. I was born in South East London, which is not that far. So different accent, but so I lived pretty much from the time I first started working at BBC. I moved to Hackney. My children were born in Hackney. That's my connection.
The sound and image thing is
Yes.
interesting, because you did something I've not seen in another filmmaker, which was that you had a sound editor and a film editor.
Yeah.
And for that kind of film, that surprised me as you were making it, and you had someone, you built up a soundtrack.
Yeah.
You sort of sculpt.
Yeah.
You'd been on that lovely
I
course.
wanted to create a kind of heightened soundtrack, because the film is although it's documentary, it is defamiliarising what you're looking at by slowing down the frame, for example, by the cutting from past to present, and the soundtrack aided that, I think, by use of documentary song sound effects, which is going out on the street and recording sound. And yes, I used a sound editor. I worked with a sound editor, and that was partly because one of the people that was really helpful to me in making the film was a film and sound editor called Larry Sider. Larry Sider was the editor, film and sound editor for Patrick Keeler's films. So when I first shot a lot of footage and I had a rough assembly, I approached him and said, "Could I show you this? Can I show you what I filmed?" And he really kindly said yes, amazingly. And so we sat down for a few hours and he reviewed the footage and he said, "Yes, I think you've got a film." And so then he put me in touch with the film editor, Hoping Chen, and with the sound editor, Lyndon Bredham, and we worked together back and forth doing.
How did the two editors work together?
They didn't work together, no. We worked separately. I worked with each, but we worked separately. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Was it ever broadcast on television?
No.
Did you try?
No. No, it was being shown at various art, film festivals, poetry festivals, art festivals, but no, not on TV.
Up the back there, that back row.
I have two questions. First one is, if you had shot it on the digital camera, do you think it would have turned out in a different way, or you would have shot it differently? And also, while you were going through the archives, did you find anything interesting?
I think if I'd shot it on a digital camera, I would have shot more footage, definitely. But as I said, the discipline was to shoot it on film. And partly that was the reason for that was because the archive was on film. So we wanted to sort of make it work and cohere in that sense. And in terms of finding anything interesting in the archive, I think I found interesting things to look at in the archive.
Whether anything you didn't use.
Oh, I see. Gosh, it's hard to remember now. I can't recall now at this distance. I think I tried to use the best that I could find and somehow place it in the film if I could. So.
Do you think the material where they're walking through the street and there's the bloke on the motorbike, do you think that's VE Day?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. It's the end of the war, isn't it? Yeah.
Look, it feels like it, but there's no celebration, so it's sort of.
Well, I think that's what I liked about it, because it was people were waiting. It was great to use that, because people were not obviously happy and joyous, and I thought that they were waiting for something. They were waiting for education and the National Health Service and the promise of good housing. I hope, you know, after the war they've been through a lot, and so again, it's why I was talking earlier about trying to express a camaraderie for people that have been through that, and you know, people of my grandparents' generation that had gone through the war in London. So I think that was part of some of my favourite archive, was actually those people at the end of the war, and I think some of the shop footage as well, inside the shops that we saw. I thought that was very vivid.
Do you think that the post-war experiment with housing and health and education will just be a blip in time, surrounded by the kind of feudal world that we've lived in before and we may be living in the future?
That's deep.
I think about it all the time.
Well, exactly. That's the regret that I was trying to express about the letting go of social, certainly that progressive project for social housing after the war, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it seems I was born in 1946, and you know, my parents had always hoped there'd be a government, something like the Attlee government, and so you know, I can remember them talking about it, because obviously 51 the Labour government fell, and so by then I'm whatever I am, obviously I'm about 5, so they were talking backwards. But what was odd, that when we think back at it, you see, was that the Conservative governments that came after that government didn't change it. They accepted that was the status quo. They didn't dare touch it because it had been brought in with such enormous popularity. So they didn't dare touch it. The first person to touch it, as we know, was Margaret Thatcher. And then she set about demolishing it all. And, quote, successfully. I mean, you know, we just think all the stuff that sold off. And they're now going, it's funny, we haven't got enough housing. Why haven't we got enough housing? And then people say, well, maybe we could build 3 social housing. You know, there's a place in Haringey near Wood Green Station, and Haringey sort of boasting outside it, you know, we're building 25 flats. And you think, when you look at, because you looked this up, didn't you, for your other programme, your radio programme you did, that the housing programme they put in place, 45 to 50, it is unbelievable. They built, I mean, I'm going to pluck a figure, something like 200,000 homes. I mean, it's just extraordinary. They had no money, you know, it was absolute austerity time, and they built 200,000 homes with loos inside and bathrooms inside, which for many of the people who went into it, they'd never seen anything like that. You know, my parents, they lived in houses that had an outside loo, and you went to the slipper baths, you went to the Schwitz in Tower Hamlets, and that's all you had. And you just think that project, in fact, yeah, you covered that in that radio show, didn't you? And again, with the NHS, you know, when you look back at what Aneurin Bevan said about the NHS, and that no person should ever have to think that they got to pay for this in order to get better. I'm not doing it as poetically as he did. Yeah, it does. It seems like this sort of moment, because you know, you go right the way through from whatever you want to start, the Industrial Revolution, and then you get to 1945 and the realisation that we've got to change this. We cannot go on like this. You know, we've had the Depression, we had the crash, and then we've had, you know, all the major forces in the world beating the hell out of each other for the second time. Let's do something different. And then it comes to an end with Thatcher, and you know, and they're sitting there bewildered, walking around and going, well, you know, you get the new Labour government comes in and says, oh well, you better take the money away from, you know, I was about to say old people, I mean me. You know, for the heating, you know, for the rest of it. It's just extraordinary. It's just, you can't think they wouldn't have thought that way in 45 to 51. They were thinking in another way because they had the impetus of the idea that you solve these things socially. Looking back at it, it kind of feels almost like a kind of communist revolution. And it wasn't, by any means. Attlee was an incredibly cautious bloke. They saw it as mild reform. But looking back on it, it sort of feels like 1917 in Russia. Which is absurd because it really wasn't. But it does seem like a 6 years of something quite extraordinary. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Oh, is that it? Yeah.